Hello, good afternoon, everybody. I'm gonna ask everyone to take a seat so we can start. So welcome this afternoon to Local, Social, Sustainable, how can the European Union help achieve sustainable development goals? If you're in the right room, then welcome. If you're not, maybe this is fate, so give us a chance. We are going to start by giving you a little bit of practical information. Today we have interpretation in English, Spanish, German, French, Italian, and Greek. So if you want to listen into your own language, you can do so. I'm going to ask the speakers to speak slowly so that the interpreters can do their job. I'm going to wait for that interpretation actually to happen here as well. Good. Are we okay? Now? Can you hear me now? Is that all right? Hello? No. Maybe we move into the other seats. That's good? Okay, that's good. Now we're good. Everything is fine. Hello, it's now working. Can you hear me in Italian? Okay, perfect. Let's move. You should know that we are tweeting live. So if you want to join the discussion also on social media, you can use the hashtag EU Regions Week or Progressive Local Stories. And we are live streaming this event. So hello to those who are seeing us from home or from wherever they are. You can find the website, it's pes.cor.eu, and we're live streaming from there. And after this debate, we will have a networking session. So if you want to keep discussing with the speakers, but with a drink, which is also very nice, you can join us afterwards. I don't want to steal more time. I'm going to first make a little introduction. So I wanted to bring you back to the refugee crisis. And I want to bring you back to all those small towns in Europe that has been taking care of those who are arriving and seeking for protection here. And I want to bring you also to the Mediterranean crisis in a point in which we had NGO vessels rescuing people in the Mediterranean. And while member states were not willing to take those people in, some cities were opening their doors for them. Why am I pointing to this? Because sometimes the European or the global problems, issues, challenges also have a local perspective. And I think the migration crisis showed that a lot, but it's not the only case. Most of the problems that we are seeing, they have a European solution, but they cannot be entirely solved if we don't involve local and regional authorities, and that's particularly the case when it comes to the SDGs. And what we are doing today specifically is actually talk about that. We are trying to bring together people from both areas, so the European and the local and regional perspective, and we are trying to discuss that. And that's what these people here with me are going to do today. They are going to bring their own perspective, the local perspective, into the debate. So local stories of building sustainable communities. And I'm going to start by introducing Maria Cacalí, who is the mayor of Agios Efstratios. I don't know if I pronounced it correctly. I hope it helped. Her political career started way before, but in 2014, she was elected as mayor, becoming the youngest mayor in Greece. And in 2019, she was re-elected with 100% of the vote cast. I am sure all the local leaders that are here in the room are going to ask for the receipt, but we can discuss that later. I also have here on my left Basilio Horta, who is the mayor of Sintra in Portugal. Mr. Horta has been a minister for commerce and tourism, deputy minister of state for the prime minister, minister of agriculture, commerce and fisheries, ambassador to the OCDE, president of Lisbon metropolitan area, and he's also a member of the committee of the region since 2014. And last but not least, Elena Piastra. She is a mayor of Cettino Torinese in Italy, and she's another John success, but she was elected as a local councillor at 25, deputy at 30, and mayor at 35 after this year election. And she won with a coalition of the third and center left, and with a plan based on social innovation and sustainable development. So this it brings us into today's debate. So I'm going to ask first a question to Maria. I'm going to try to do it slow so we can have a good translation. So you are a mayor in a rather remote Iceland, and you're a young person. What are the challenges and the opportunities that you face to make such a small and remote Iceland sustainable, but also appealing for young people to stay?
Καλημέρα σας. Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ για την...
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for giving me the floor. And thank you for allowing me to share my experience with you. First and foremost, I wanted to tell you that our island is located in the Aegean Sea on the eastern side. The microphone's been cut off, I'm afraid. So please don't touch the microphone button, participants. We're a mainly agricultural region, and we have a strong fisheries sector as well. In terms of the municipality, we have one person in charge of the cleaning side of things. In terms of the challenges in Agios Statios, there are a number of challenges facing us. We want to be economically independent in terms of the other municipalities. We want our island to be attractive, and we want it to be independent as well. We're working in different sectors to try and achieve this, particularly in the digital sector. This requires a lot of commitment from the public administration and public services. You can't do everything digitally or online. For some services, we have to use those of other islands, and we're doing everything we can to become independent in this regard, independent of the other regions. This should allow us to really become independent using communication tools, and we should have the necessary structures in the municipality to allow us to attract people in and to attract investment into the island. We need also to attract new inhabitants who need access to infrastructure such as education. If we want to attract young people with young children, that really is a key point. If we can do this, people will be able to settle permanently. We have EU support to help us in this regard. There are financial tools that allow us to set up the necessary infrastructure and to carry out the necessary work to do this, despite the economic crisis which struck us hard. This really did change the way we live. And some people actually decided to come to the island because of the crisis. Of course, it's an island that attracts tourists. There are humanitarian aspects as well. But we are an island. We're working closely with Tandem Europe to try and improve the attractiveness of our island. We also want to develop the humanitarian and voluntary sectors to really make our island attractive. Moreover, we want to improve the municipalities' infrastructures and structures so that we can make the necessary services available, so that we can bring costs down as well, and so that our priorities can be met. We want people to open companies, to start up companies. We want wind farms and solar panels as well on the island, so that we've got different sources of renewable energy. We want to create jobs in this way and strengthen infrastructures in the health and education sectors by using more new technologies, using online services for the municipality, and through free connections as well. There are a number of different companies that will be working on helping us to develop and to improve our image to the outside world. Now, what are some of the examples that I could show you in terms of our island becoming more attractive and more sustainable, and for people to come and live there permanently? Well, firstly, we have to understand the problems for small islands. We have to try and help everyone, all the different players, all the different stakeholders and people, to make sure that they can stay. And we hope that our example is one that can be rolled out in other examples in other regions across Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. I want to make a short practical remark. Please don't play with the buttons that you have in front of you, because that's why sometimes we see the micro being cut. And also, I wanted to say, because I didn't say that before, we want you to be part of the debate. So if there is anything you want to ask, any comment you want to make, think about it, because in a few minutes we will get back to you. Now I want to give the floor to Basilio Orta. In 2018, the Sustainability Index report concluded that Sintra had already achieved 74% of its goals to sustainable development. So how do you do that? And how do you move forward from that after you have already collected the hanging ball?
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you very much for this invitation. I'm very proud to be here with you and tackle some issues I think that they are on the agenda, on the most important agenda. Well, about Sintra, I must say that Sintra, it's a municipality which is near Lisbon. We have tourism, very strong tourism. Last year we have 5 million of visitors, but Sintra is not only that. Sintra is the second biggest municipality in Portugal in terms of population. We have about 400,000 people in the 33 square kilometers. We have 38 nationalities. We have 36,000 of migrants, legal migrants, because not legal migrants, we have about 30,000. So we have heavy responsibilities in SDGs, and we have work on the 5 issues of SDGs. First, people. Second, prosperity. Third, planet. 4, peace. And 5, partnership. And in all these 5 issues, we have always the support of European Union in all the initiatives that we do in each of these issues. People, we have reached about 67% of the goal, but in the social dimension we have 70%. In social dimension, we believe, really we believe in inclusive development. We have signed the Declaration of New York 5 years ago, and we believe that the development, we can only say that we have developed a region when everyone is inside of this kind of development. And we do that. So in social dimension, just to see what the priority of the municipality in this matter, 5 years ago, our budget, it was hardly 1 million. Today is more than 6 million. only for social dimension. We have two projects which are very, very important ones. One is Sintra Inclui, the other is Sintra Integra. Sintra Inclusive, Sintra Integration. What is that? Sintra Inclui, it's a project to give, to make a reception and integration of disabled people. We give jobs for disabled people with the support of the entrepreneurship of the municipality. And Sintra Inclui, it's the same for mental diseases. So I think that it's a very important, two important projects, and they are quite the symbol of what we want to do when we say inclusive development and inclusive growth. Well, we have also other projects, but I think there's no need because these two are quite symbolic. In terms of prosperity, well, we have about 75%, but in industry innovation, we have 90%. Why? Why? Because the add value by worker is the highest in the country, in Portugal. The add value by worker, I think it's very good, and we are very proud of it because we have a very strong relations with our workers and with our syndicates. I think that we have a dialogue. We have even a council, a strategic council for economy, and they are seated in this council, the entrepreneurs, but also the representatives of trade unions. The two trade unions that we have, one linked more at Socialist Party. By the way, we have elections last Sunday, and we have won for 40% against 99.3% of the opposition. So we are quite glad about it. So, but I say that, so we have very good relations. So they are seated in this council, trade unions and entrepreneur. So the add value by worker is the highest in the country. We have a Fab Lab, which is quite important because it's open to young people, to the schools. They can work there. And we have a platform, we have created a platform for economy. And in this platform, entrepreneurs, they can dialogue with each other. They put suggestions, they put critics, and so on. It's a living platform that make a good arrangement with entrepreneurship. About planet, we have 68%, we achieved it, but in environment, we have 71%. Okay, this is quite important for us. We are in the Covenant Mayors, and we achieve 30% of reduction in CO2. We were obliged to 20%, but we have 30%. We have done a lot of things in energy, and the problem of energy is to convince the families, people in these houses to change habits. That's the main question, because we do that with us in the schools, we do that in our municipality, but people in these houses, they are not all aware of the needs to change, and we do that in terms of communication. So, but we have a lot of things. We invest in the bicycle path. We have 30 kilometers of bicycle path, which is quite important for us. And we have a municipal plan of development. And this municipal plan of development gives priority to urban parks. We have too much concrete. We have too much concrete in our territory, so we need urban parks. We are doing the second biggest part in the metropolitan area of Lisbon with about 200 hectares. It's Cargueira. The first phase is already in contest. It's 22 acres. And we have a lot of urban parks because we need very much this. We have 6 years. I have 6 years of mandate, and it's one of my priority, even in terms of leisure. People are in this house. If they want to go out to get a garden, some they have not. So we need to do that. About peace, which is very important. When we talk about peace, always we talk about peace in the streets, but also peace in our conscience. I think it's important because otherwise it's difficult to have peace in the streets. We have our migrants, and till now we have peace because we have the reception and integration of these people. We do not believe in ghettos. We have a municipal plan to reception and integrated people, who is declined in a lot of initiatives. Observatoire of migrants, for instance, who are near the migrants. They know what they need, the jobs, everything that they need. The same that our citizens. The same as our citizens. We do not talk about tolerance. We talk about living together. It's now. We have 7.5 thousands of Muslims, and they are with us, till now. This for us, this municipality plan, which is supported by Aga Khan Foundation, with money of European Union too, it's very important to us. And here in the Committee of Regions, we have talked a lot about this plan, and we are very, very committed with this plan of integration and reception, because I think it's the good way to have peace. To have peace, to have people with us. Okay, we never know what can happen, but at least we have done our best in this way. Finally, in partnership, we have a lot of partnership. First, with other municipalities. We have a project which is a very, very nice project. It's the Blue-Green Axe. It's an axe of 11 kilometers that cross the municipality. Is a pedestrian and cycling path. It goes by the mountain of Cargueira till the sea. It's very interesting. It's a Blue-Green Axe. Is supported 50% by European Union. It's all planned and partnership because we have 3 municipalities with us. So it's together. Also, we have the 3 municipalities in solid trash treatment, which is quite important too, together. We have also very deep, very strong partnership with ONGs. We support, municipalities support 20% of the investment of these ONGs in nurseries, for instance, in daycare for seniors, for instance, and continuous care. We support 20%. It's a lot of money. We have about 15 million euros to do that together with them. And finally, partnership with the government, I think, which sometimes is not easier. But this government is our government. We support this government well. But nevertheless, sometimes dialogue is a strong dialogue. We have done a hospital, because we needed very much an hospital. The municipality paid the hospital 30 million. We have also need to unities of social affairs. In terms of health, we have 4. We invest also. So even in security terms, we are with the government in the security forces. So globally, this is what we are done. It's not enough, but nevertheless, we have done our best. Thank you very much.
It's never enough. It seems, I think it's very interesting because if we looked at both what Ms. Kakali and Mr. Orta has said, there was raised the issue of the need for money and the support of the EU, which is very important. It's something that we will discuss later. They have highlighted the need to include people in everything that we do, because at the end, the local authorities are the closest to the citizens, so it's really important to keep the dialogue. And it's important there is a good cooperation at all levels, civil society, NGOs, European authorities, national authorities, so we can all tackle the main challenges that we have ahead. Now I want to move to Elena Piastra, and actually I want to kind of raise the issue because in a way we've been talking about very positive initiatives. So how can we do better? How can we improve? And you actually won the election with a very positive agenda to try to boost in social innovation, to improve environmental sustainability. So do you think this is the recipe to overcome the far right, given the view won over Lega in Italy? Do you think that that's the way to move forward, giving citizens something to be hoped for?
Gran bella domanda. Intanto
That's a big question. Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for allowing me to be here. It's great. It's an honour to be here for my city. Settimo Tonese. I've been the mayor for about 4 months now. And the big difference has been to do with concentrating on those issues that we've heard about expressed very well. We're in a different phase vis-à-vis our colleagues. We're at the start of the journey. But the main issues looking to the recent election were to do with the coalition. We decided not to shut ourselves down in terms of the having as much of the centre left as possible, and of the 6 lists from the coalition, 5 reached a quorum, so that was good. The second point was to do with the electoral campaign, which was very positive. We decided not to be too ideological, not to accept attacks, even personal attacks, to not clash with others, which is something that other populists do tend to use quite fully. And then, more than anything else, I think what made the difference was that we were working for our city. City Montonese has about 4,000 inhabitants. We went from 10 to almost 50 million inhabitants in about 10 years. And we had an industrial boom, a lot of immigration. Not that far from Turin, we had a lot of heavy industry. We saw immigration like you talked about earlier, Beatrice, because Settimo has a lot of immigration from in northern Italy, about 40,000 people in the reception centres over 12 years. So we also have moved on to the second step in terms of what happens to these people afterwards. Now you can see some pictures here that show what happens with immigration. And then in terms of what the industry's left behind and what it leaves still now, amongst other things, the town has the highest concentration of people using social services in the Piemonte region. And at the same time, it's a town that is dealing with environmental pollution, particularly ground pollution, soil pollution, because we have had chromatic, we have had chrome. We had a lot of chrome processing before that went to China, so we've got a lot of chrome pollution. And then in terms of environmental, it's important in our projects, as you may well imagine. Settimo has done a lot with its parks, but we're looking at having new ones, trying to stop consuming the soil, as it were, dealing with refuse collection. We're not where we want to be, but we want to improve things there. But it is not enough to stay at the local level here. So Europe's important here. Europe can really make a difference to us in terms of what we've got left over from history. We need to start making people have to improve the environmental situation. Owners need to have to do that. We should make them clean up the environment. If it's not obligatory, then it's difficult for local authorities to take action. And then there are some other aspects. We often talk about the environment, which is quite right, of course, finally. But if you're from an industrial town like ours, not only ours, but the environment in that context means living under the effects of the directives. To give you an example, looking not only in my town, but elsewhere in Italy, single-use plastics are very important. The European directive has means that we have to change those. So Italy is particularly affected by that directive. But at the same time, we haven't yet set out an investment system for this so that businesses can move and prepare for the transition. So the risk is that local authorities will be up against businesses at crisis point without having any real tools at their disposal, except those of last instance, such as social funds and so on. So if you're thinking about green development, then that's not the right tools, particularly if you're looking at sustainable development, because sustainability has very many different forms, and it's one of the most important aspects. One of the most important aspects is sustainability for everyone. So we need to be strong at European level and think about sustainability, whereby we should have mandatory transition, and at the same time the local authorities need to have the right tools so they can take action without leaving anyone behind. Because my fear is that we may well just take superficial action or react late. The important thing for Europe is to take action right at the start in training for local administrators, such as me, for example, so that we can prepare for what it means and what it could mean, perhaps taking inspiration from other parts in terms of what crisis management means, whereby we need a change of strategy, a change of model. And that's the case for the whole of the welfare system. In our program, there's a lot of talk about old people, because we've got 50,000 people, but 12,000 old people. So it's very important that we give these people the right attention, which is very different to how it was previously, and change the city, change the town, rebuild. And the Mayor report talks about hospitals. We need to talk about sheltered housing, places for places where older people are taken care of. We need to change society. We need to manage our urban spaces, looking at the role of where people live, new forms of living, and aside from infrastructure, transforming our infrastructure is very important. The possibility of bringing places together that are quite a long way apart. So not necessarily thinking about road transport, but or vehicle transport, but new ways of moving around. So Europe can do a lot using all of this, and local authorities really need to be here and learn. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you have touched upon a couple of subjects that we haven't discussed yet, and also European global challenges that local authorities are facing. One of them is an aging population, you just mentioned right now, that matter. And also, again, what we were discussing before about migration. All those changes also have impacts at local level, but we need to have an European perspective. And again, we were talking about money and the need for investment. And I also found very interesting that you mentioned the case of the plastic industry in Italy, because I recently hear about this case. And I think, again, it's really important to understand that we need a fair transition, right? Like we need to accompany that transition if we also want to improve and to strengthen the fight against climate change. And because you all have mentioned Europe, you all have mentioned the need for investment, the need for support for the local authorities. I want you to tell me now, what do you think that you can do, and whether you think that the current cohesion policy, the way that it has been presented by the still Juncker Commission, is fit for purpose when it comes to implementing the SDGs. Who wants to jump first? Maybe you then.
Thank you. Well, this is quite a difficult question. I think that we must begin to talk about the budget of European Union and about priorities inside this budget. First, the problem of cohesion is a big problem. We can talk about environment, we can talk about sustainable goals, okay? This is very important, but cohesion. Cohesion is the other name of solidarity, which is another name of European Union, of the sustainable idea and project of the European Union himself. So I think that first, this idea of cohesion must remain and must be implemented. And I think that the effect of the Brexit, it's quite important, but the countries who believe really in cohesion must be aware that perhaps they need to increase his finance support to the European Union, because I think we will need. Yesterday in the plenary of the CCDR, we heard about the Commission about it. Perhaps we need to increase 1% at least. So I think that is the first priority. And after that, I think that the sustainable development goals, I think that it's quite important in terms of climate change. We need to do that, really, we need to do that. Climate change is not anymore something that we can talk about, but we cannot see. We can see what is climate change. And I think that we must tackle a lot of problems there. First, development and research, because we need new technicians and new models of fight against climate change. Second, communication. And we must, people, I said, at least, saying a few moments ago, people in these houses must be aware of the needs of climate change, and change is energy. And after the local and the central and local authorities. But I think that central local authorities, they are in his way. I talk about my country, what the government has done, and what we have done in my municipality, and we invest a lot of money with the European Union. The European Union is with us in 50%, and in some projects 85% of the investments. And I think it's very good in terms of illumination, for instance, school. We change every energy in the schools. In the roof of the schools in this moment, almost a lot of our schools, because in Portugal, Sintra is #1 in schools, more than Lisbon. Well, we have lots of young people. We have lots of schools. So, but in the roof, we are changing, solar energy and a lot of other things that we have done, and always with the support of the European Union. But as I said, it's a problem first of budget, second of cohesion, third of priorities inside the budget.
Thank you very much. I was wondering, Elena, if you wanted to dig a little bit on the fact that sometimes when we take decisions at European level, they have a different impact depending on the region and the city. And the very fact that you were mentioning how a European directive that we all can agree on, eventually that's going to have a real impact on people's lives in your particular region. So I was wondering if you think that there is a lack of communication in between the European level and the local level. How do you think that could be solved?
Allora, certamente.
Well, Europe represents very different countries, and even inside Italy, there are different requirements that meet different needs. So, having the directive at the same time here and taking it to the final level in my town, because one of the three biggest producers of single-use plastics is in the town. So you need to look at each sector, but if you need to put the environment alongside local issues, that's very difficult. But the most important thing, I think, if we want to give incentives for transformation, is to invest in new technologies, give incentives to all companies so that they can move ahead. Because the social risk and the fallout on that in not doing things in time and being up against the final directive is a huge risk, locally speaking. It's a huge thing. So opportunities like this one are very important for local authorities, and it's not always easy for municipalities to talk at this level directly. So that's why these events are very important and they need to be kept. But perhaps we could have a way in between these kinds of things, so that Maria, I'm sure you have very different requirements, much more to do with transport where you live, which you talked about before. They're less important for me directly, so we need to look at the topics here and pinpoint those municipalities that have something to say directly in terms of what's going on with companies. So that could make a difference, but particularly because we're always saying that the left wing needs to be with people. The left wing needs to be people. So it's quite hard to be that if you don't know that the directive, theoretically speaking, is essential. Of course, we need to defend it, but it does have an impact. It does have a social impact on people that's quite considerable, because the risk is that Europe steps in later, that Piemonte will ask for support for people that are out of jobs. And there are certain sectors that are particularly hit, plastics, for example. We've seen a similar thing with steelworks, for example. Ilva in Taranto, for example, that's a huge issue. That's a huge factory, similar to what we're seeing in other towns. So the environment needs to go hand in hand with business when we take decisions. And the only way to be successful is invest as much as possible, perhaps more than previously, as opposed to, and also to give companies incentives to work in time, and so that no one's left behind.
Thank you very much. I think it's really important to highlight all the need to accompany this transition and to invest as well in innovation to make sure that businesses can actually transition as well, and we can keep the jobs of the people that are going to be affected by these decisions. I wanted to ask Maria, because what you were saying just right now, the situation in a remote island in Greece, I'm sure is completely different to what we have seen in many other regions in Europe. And you were mentioning before the need for investment, so you can actually attract more investment into the Iceland, and you can create jobs and you can make people stay. So I was wondering, how can the EU help you do that? Do you think that the specificities of very remote areas are actually included in cohesion policy? Because I've seen for many years the complaints coming from remote areas in Europe about how they don't see themselves reflected in this legislation. So I wanted to have your view on this in particular.
Είναι πολλά τα θέματα. Δεν ξέρω κατά πόσο.
Well, that's a lot of questions. And I don't know how much of an answer I can give you. Let me try and think of some easily implementable solutions at the EU level. We live on a very small island, and it's got its own problems. I'm not sure if you can imagine them, but I want to try and give you an idea of the seriousness of these problems, despite the very small size of our island. How can we attract people to come and live on our island? How can we bring in companies and attract them and encourage them to invest on the island? I think that the major program for islands, which we want to launch by the end of 2019, which is due to start operating more or less a year later, is a program that, yes, I think could attract people. It's based on new energy sources, energy independence for the island, and it makes sure that there will be energy for all households for heating and air conditioning, principally. The oil price will thus be replaced, and I think that energy will become cheaper, and it will become cheaper for people to live on the island. Recently, a program was started, and this program looked at the transfer of products from cities to small islands. It's true that solutions can be found for this kind of issue, but we haven't seen any real examples, at least over a long enough period of time, to see exactly what the problems are and to see how exactly we can find solutions to these problems. To attract people to come to the island, young people, for instance, we're trying to really focus on sustainable development. We're trying to promote our cultural and historic heritage, the quality of life, education and health. Now, these are all areas that need improvement, but they require time. It takes time to improve them. The important thing, I think, is to discuss these issues, to try and identify what the stakes are, what the problems are for small islands, and then once we've mapped out all of the different problems, we will know exactly what kind of thing we need to address in terms of the solutions. How can we bring solutions to the problems? There are no ready-made solutions for small islands and their communities because each isolated community is specific. Yes, what we need is some kind of tool, but given the context, we have to look at the specificities of these isolated communities where there are very few inhabitants. That's the way that we can then attract more people who will choose to live in these isolated places, such as small islands and other places, to decide to live there on an ongoing basis.
Renewable energy before, you're talking about the need to accompany the transition. So I was wondering if you see the implementation of sustainable development goals as an opportunity for your region, for your city, and how can the EU help to try to turn those challenges into opportunities? Particular example, very concrete. Anyone want to jump?
Well, I think that European Union is a partner, a very important partner in achieve the sustainable development goals. It's quite important, but the initiative must be from local authorities. And I think local authorities, I talk about municipalities and also municipality association, which has a role, very important role, and I think perhaps the role of the Association of Municipalities is not, till now, in my opinion, is not seen so useful as it can be. For instance, in Portugal, the Municipal Council of Lisbon is important in terms of mobility, and they achieve a huge success in those terms. We have this moment, we have increased our mobility in more than 50%, and we have decreased energy, CO2, and the energy, the green energy with this mobility. It's quite important. It was not the municipality, but the associations of municipality of Lisbon, which are 11. So together we put together, and we have built a very good job. Okay, but there is a program which is called POSEUR, which is a European program, and they support a part of this program in 85%. Without the support of European Union, it's not possible to achieve the goals that we have done in mobility terms.
Elena, Maria.
Συγγνώμη για την καθυστέρηση.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Well, what can I say? Of course, I agree with my colleague from Sintra. What we're lacking, in addition to the description of the problems, the mapping, if you like, the EU can definitely help us and to give us options to deal with our needs. But what we're lacking, I'd say, is information. Information is really missing. There's a definite lack of information. It's not enough to ask the municipality or the local authorities what's happening and what they lack. What is needed, one way or another, is for the situation to be described clearly and for information to be made available online. Yes, specialized programs are needed, but it's not always as straightforward as all that. I can't say this is the way we need to do it. On the municipality side, the information needs to be made available, and dialogue is absolutely key as well. We have to ensure that there's an ongoing, permanent dialogue so that solutions can be found gradually so that we can meet our objectives.
Thank you, Maria. Very quickly, Elena, and we pass to the questions from the audience.
Rapidamente, ci sono livelli diversi.
Well, there are different levels. Firstly, and I think this is quite clear, the mayor of Sintra made this very clear, is training, knowledge, whereby officials have a link to Europe. And that can be very positive, given that obviously that can have an economic effect in terms of considerable resources. So municipalities need training because the risk is that you get municipalities that are ready to work with Europe, and the others are left behind because they're smaller, they don't have the right level of training or human resources. In Italy, for example, not enough people are taken on. That's quite a historic problem. But so for various reasons, the issue of training, making sure that all local bodies can constantly work alongside Europe, that's an important thing. And that's particularly important for local bodies. So municipalities need and should have to do this kind of thing. In Italy, for example, there would be putting municipalities together and getting them a Europe office. So they would have to have those, and they would work just with Europe. But so that would be working alongside Europe, acting as a spokesperson, talking about the various different emergencies, and they vary from country to country, place to place. And then looking at the interface, we need a place where administrators can report on how things are, pass that on. The other part is to do with the higher ranks of the European Parliament where decisions are made, such as what's urgent. We need a law pushing companies to make the transition, because that's where the work's done. particularly on certain topics. And we need a law against soil pollution in terms of cleaning up polluted places, issues where there's a lot of work being done for quite a lot of time, very important, and that will have an impact on local authorities. That's where Europe can act, and those two things need to be taken into account.
Point made by all of you about the importance of the information and having a strong relationship with Europe. I think it's really key that having a good dialogue and being aware of what we're doing at European level, what we're doing at local level, and how we can help. Now I want to see if there is anyone in the audience that would want to ask a question or make a comment, contribute to the debate. No? Yes? Please.
Lucian Andrei, Galați City Council, Romania. I would like to ask the speakers, what is your definition, personal definition, about sustainability? On a personal note, of course.
Well, it's a very good question. What is sustainability for me? Sustainability is to have the opportunity to have quality of life in respect of environment and respect of the rights of the people. This for me is sustainability. It's a good life in a good territory with justice, social justice. That's for me sustainability.
Θα συμφωνήσω και εγώ με τον συνάδελφο.
Yeah, I would completely agree with our colleague from Sintra. It's pretty clear cut for everyone, at least for me, personally speaking. We need to live in an environment where there is a quality of life, not just for me, but for my children. I want my children to grow up in an environment which is pleasant. I want them to respect the environment, and I want them to live together, respecting other people as well, so that they really are living as a part of a real society. Thank you.
Mi sono fatta la stessa domanda.
Well, I was thinking the same thing when I saw the title of today's meeting, and it might not be that straightforward to respond to that question, but I was thinking sustainability is a line. It's not always a straight line. It's not always easy between accessibility for everybody and progress. Progress in terms of improving the environment, not only though, also in terms of the social system transformation. At the same time, you need accessibility, because the risk is forgetting that sustainability in some sectors doesn't give accessibility to all. So you need to reconcile the two, which is an important part of our challenges here.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wants to go ahead?
So, hello everyone, my name is Inês Xavier and I am from Portugal. So I am from the interior north of the country. So we are in a week that we are speaking about cohesion, but my reality is completely different from Sintra reality. I am from a small village that we have 100 people living there, and another of us are studying or working in other places that is not our hometown. Sintra has physical conditions that allows the numbers that Dr. Basilio Horta spoke about, but we don't have proximity to airports or proximity to capitals, and even we don't have infrastructures that allows fixing people there. As a young elected people, I am a councillor there. I would like to ask you what kind of measures we can adopt there to fix people, to attract new people to our lands too, because I don't really believe that we have a cohesion in Portugal between the littoral and interior of the country. Thank you so much.
My dear friend, I could respond you in Portuguese. I'm so nice. It's so good to see you here. Okay, very nice. Okay, you know, my dear friend. I think that the problem is not only a Portuguese problem. We see in all Europe. You see lots of people are going to near the sea, to the littoral, and the interior of some countries. But in Portugal, you are right, absolutely right. The interior of some countries are without people. You will see that is a main problem of Portugal. It's absolutely true. But the problem is how can we avoid that? How can we avoid that? It's very difficult. I don't know if we can avoid that. I don't know. Because we have done a lot of measures, fiscal measures, finance incentives, everything we have done. Everything, you have strategy infrastructures for industry, and a lot of them are without any industry. You know that. Sometimes you have a lot of gymnasiums inside in the interior, and some of them has 5 or 6 people. And the problem is, how can we do better? Because we cannot oblige people, go to the inside, we cannot do that. I think that the model of development, I think it's a problem of education. If you have good schools, if you have good universities, and you see the huge importance of the universities in the north of the country to this area, because a lot of people is fixed there. But you must have schools, good universities, in order that people go there and stay there. That's the main problem. But I think that we must continue to work with people, to form people, the state invest in transports and so on, because it's absolutely important. But I must tell you one thing. You talk about Sintra, but Sintra, it's quite a diverse region. We almost, more than a municipality, we are almost a region. We have 4% of a GDP is in Sintra, but you go to the north of Sintra, and you see a rural system, with huge difficulties in mobility. So only now, with the support of the European Union, we have increased the offer of transportation. But 2 years ago, 3 years ago, if you go from one point of the north of the country to the sea, you are young people to the beach, you have no transportation. You don't go. You have a car, or otherwise, it's a huge problem. It is 15 kilometers out of Lisbon. Well, so this is quite a problem of development. The country you are right, because the development could be an equal development, and the interior would be in high priority. Governments say that, do that, but the results are not enough results. You are right, it's not results. But we must keep trying.
Thank you very much for the response. I'm going to have to apologize to the audience because this is entirely my fault, but we are running out of time. So we have to close this panel, but I promise you that you will have the time to ask more questions to a very interesting panel coming up afterwards. I want to thank you, the speakers, for the interventions. They were really interesting. And I want to ask now our keynote speaker, Mr. Paul Magnet, to join us for his speech. Mr. Magnet has been Minister for Health, Social Action and Equal Opportunities of the Wallon government, and Minister for Climate, Energy, first, and then Public Enterprises, Scientific Policy and Development Cooperation, later when he was part of the federal government. And from 2014 to 2017, he was Minister President of the Wallonie region. And furthermore, he is a respected academic. He has been professor at the Université Libre de Bruxelles, where he has been conducting research on European Union institutional policies and democracy. So please, bienvenue, merci.
Well, thank you very much, Mrs. Chair, for your introduction, and thank you very much to the PES Group of the Committee of the Regions for the invitation. I'm very, very pleased to be here. Thank you to the new president of our group who just enters the room. I think it's very important to have moments like this when we can exchange experiences in the different member states, and when we can, I hope, raise the awareness of all the other members of the PES family that we mayors have a very important role to play in all this implementation of the sustainable goal and the green transition in general. We mayors are maybe the last politicians in Western Europe and Eastern Europe who are not completely rejected by the citizens. We are often criticized by the citizens, but maybe we are the last category of politicians which are still considered as a reliable and examples of integrity in political life, because we have direct contacts with the citizens on everyday basis, and because and the examples that we've just listened to in the former session are a very good example of this, because in our everyday business as mayors and as local elected politicians, we are those who exemplify those policies in this transition. And it is very important that the whole S&D and PES group does not forget that. More often than not, we are invited in those big conferences between two MPs and two MEPs and two very important ministers and political leaders to just give one example or one illustration of this. We should remind them of the fact that we are the roots of social democracy in Europe, and we are the first contact of many citizens with what social democracy actually is and how we can translate all those noble ideals in the practice of our everyday work. So I am the mayor of a medium city, which is considered a big city in Belgium, but Belgium being a small country, each city thinks it's big. We have 200,000 inhabitants, which is a typical medium European city. A post-industrial city, which has experienced a very, very deep industrial crisis already in 1960s, 70s, but again, 5 years ago with the closure of a big plant by Caterpillar and the loss of more than 2,000 jobs just in one day. And so we know what transition means economically, in terms of sustainability. We've lost lots of jobs. We are confronted with, in everyday life, with what poverty means, with what unemployment means on a large basis, and also, of course, with all the ecological consequences of the industrial civilization. We have lots of old plants, which photographers find very nice to take in pictures, and very Instagrammable, as people say today, but which are not always very easy to manage on an everyday basis, and lots of polluted and abandoned grounds. And we can see that as a weakness, but we can also see this as a strength. Because we have in those cities, and this is the same, of course, in Britain, in Germany, in France, in northern Italy, in all and many other regions in Europe, and also in Eastern Europe, of course, which have experienced the same industrial cycle. This is a big chance to completely reshape our cities and to move from one generation, the generation of the 19th century, direct to the 21st century. And make our cities really an example of sustainable cities. Most of us, and I guess this is your experience too as mayors, do have plans, and usually very multifunctional plans. We have an Agenda 21, that was a very fashionable instrument a few years ago, which is an integrated strategy, which includes chapters about mobility, soft mobility, of course, and collective mobility, chapters about energy, how can we better isolate the buildings and reduce the consumption of energy, chapters about biodiversity and the reintegration of nature in the city, chapters, of course, about education and how we can help the citizens and the young citizens particularly to develop their skills and to find their place in the society and to develop all the capacities that they have in themselves. But my experience as a mayor, and I'm sure most of you do share this, is that you can only be very efficient when all those strategies are, of course, very important. And of course, you need to have the targets, to have the evaluation, to have the data and that kind of things, and to have a clear roadmap for your administration and for all the actors which are active on your territory, including the private actors. But my experience, as I said, as I think most of you must share this, is that you can only be efficient when you manage to create enthusiasm in your society, when you manage to find sometimes very small things, but which are understandable by every citizen and which create some kind of hope in the perception of the citizens that, yes, you can deeply change the face of your city and make it much more pleasant to live as a place than it is today. And I would like to give two examples, which might not sound as the most important in terms of sustainability, but which have proved very important in my city because they have created this mobilization and this appropriation of the goals by the citizens when we've launched the initiatives. One is about trees. We all love trees because we are animals. We sometimes forget it, but we need trees. And when we see all those cities which have lost the presence of nature, and especially industrial cities, where most of the space was occupied by big industry and housing and municipal functions, and where nature had nearly disappeared, people have this nostalgia for nature and for the presence of nature. And when we organize small actions with citizens, we invite all the citizens who want to come with us and plant 1,000 trees on a Sunday morning, and we decide to plant a small forest here and there. And with all the advantages this includes, of course, not only in terms of biodiversity, but also in terms of protection against the sound of the big roads and the transportation, and also simply the pleasure to see a tree and to see nature just in front of your house. The enthusiasm of this experience, the fact that dozens of citizens are together with trees and planting them and recovering this very simple pleasure of recreating the nature is an experience which is, I think, a human and life experience which is sometimes much more important in terms of public perception of the action that we take than the big programs that we can have otherwise in terms of economic recovery or in terms of transportation and that kind of things. And another example which is very important for me is food. Food is very important, and I believe food is the key of sustainability, and agriculture policy and food policy in the European Union should, I think, become a key focus of attention for social democrats. The regional government in my country, the Walloon government, has recently decided to subsidize free lunch for the kids in the schools. Because we came to the conclusion that many kids don't eat safe food at school, and that we know that this has big impacts in terms of public health. We know that 50% of the illnesses are created by a lack of quality in the food. And so this government decided to launch those free lunches in the school, and natural lunches, if possible, for those kids. And there again, you see, we first launched a procedure, and a big company, Sodexo, not to mention it, won the market, and they distributed lunch in the schools that were absolutely awful, and the kids didn't like it, and the program was nearly ruined by the fact that it was not just good food, it was junk food. It was free, but it was bad. So it also associated the idea that free means no quality. So we decided to change, and we decided to create our own cuisine and to use products that were produced not in the city itself, because the city has no capacity to produce so many foods. We have some space, but not that much. But to buy products that are produced in the metropolitan area. And this proved very important because it recreated a sort of alliance between the city, which is the biggest place of consumption of food, and the surroundings of the city, which is the most important place where food is produced. And we also explained to the people that we have lots of products that maybe we don't eat very often anymore because we're used to eating products that come from very far away, from Southern America, from New Zealand, and so on and so forth, although we have an incredible capacity to produce high quality food here in our region. And we worked with cooks and see how can we convince the kids that that kind of food, the lentils, or I don't know, or beetroots, or that kind of things, and white carrots that we have, can be very flavorful. And it's incredible to see a 3 or 4 years old kid trying those things and making the experience of trying a food they have never tried before and say, well, a bit strange at first, and then after a few days, a few weeks, a few months, they can't eat that junk food from Sodexo anymore. And you have built an alliance because you have restored this very important thing, which is taste. Taste is one of the biggest sources of pleasure in life. So if you like tasting things, and I'd rather be blind than lose taste, because the taste is something which is very important as a source source of pleasure. When you manage to educate the kids to this taste and to the fact that with taste, you also work on the quality of nature. You also rebuild this alliance between the city and the landscape and the agricultural economy. You also create jobs in those public cuisines for cooks and for very often young kids who don't have lots of skills, but who can get very rapidly those skills to become a very good cook and find that they can play an important role in the society too. You rebuild. It's incredible how a project like that, just sending food to the schools and creating a central cuisine, which is located in the area and which is connected to the area, it creates an incredible enthusiasm in the society. I think we need to find that kinds of projects. Of course, all the other ones are important, but through one project like that, you can explain mobility. You don't need products which comes from 5,000 kilometers away. You can explain energy. You don't need to put lots of chemicals to produce good foods. You can explain public health. You can explain education, because of course this has a very important impact on the physical and brain formation of the kids, and also on their capacity to study and to be successful in life and find their way and their place in the society. Through a very simple thing as the pleasure of eating good food and sharing a good food in school and educating the kids to this and associating the families to this experience, you can really create the connections and the perception that all those elements are connected, and there are all those elements of a big transition that we are step by step creating. And also you have pleasure. You have a lot of pleasure, a lot of very positive feelings, and you need that if you want to create this enthusiasm and this movement. So let's try and find ideas like that. I'm sure you have lots of ideas like those ones, lots of experience like the ones we've done in this city. Let's promote them, and let's link this to the big EU policies, because this is my point. You can only make projects like that if you change the common agricultural policy. You can only favor local products and local transformation if you change the rules of international trade. You can only support local producers if you change the regulations of the market and you promote local producers and not the big agri-food companies. So taking the things from the little, from the very little experience in your everyday life is also a way of repoliticizing the discussion about the purposes and about the means of European policies and creating a big political debate. So let's try and find projects like that, and let's try and, through all those projects that we mayors at local level bear on every day, make sure that this big transition can go much faster and much wider than is the case today. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. In fact, I think, first of all, I found really interesting that you said that maybe mayors are the last politicians that they are not rejected by citizens. And I think that some national governments and EU politicians could make a good use of that, indeed. And I think you pointed out a couple of issues that are really interesting and it can actually help us to transition to the next debate, is the fact that there is some sort of social European divide in terms of post-industrial societies and societies that are a little bit more advanced, that they actually don't need so much this transition, whereas others, they are not able yet to see all the benefits of transitioning into a greener economy. I think it was really important that you pointed out to the circular economy and how we can actually make use of this as an opportunity to improve the situation in our cities, and how important it is to link all of these to European policies, and this is exactly what we're going to discuss afterwards. And I also found really interesting, and I am sure that one of our speakers is going to completely agree with you on the need to engage with citizens and create enthusiasm when it comes to implementation of the SDGs. So thank you very much for your speech, and I'm going to thank you again to all our speakers in the first panel and ask them to just leave, and now welcome the next panel of speakers for today. Thank you very much. So I'm going to take the opportunity to tell you which debate we're going to have now. So now we're going to discuss towards a progressive new Green Deal. I'm sure you have been following EU politics in the past few months, and we have a new president-elect for the European Commission, and one of her priorities for the first 100 days is putting together a Green Deal. And we don't know yet the details. However, we're going to have a small brainstorming today here to see what local authorities, trade unions, and the European Parliament is expecting from that Green New Deal. I think we're started already. I'm going to start by introducing our panelists today. So here on my right, I have Peter Kurz. He's the Lord Mayor of Mannheim, and he has been a mayor of the city since 2007. And before then, he was deputy responsible for education, culture, sports, and city branding. He has been a lawyer and a judge, and he had a long political career. He's been member of the Committee of the Regions, but he also belonged to other organizations gathering local and regional authorities, such as the Governance Committee for the Chamber of Local Authorities in the Congress of the Council of Europe. Thank you, Peter, for being here today. On my left, I have Lina Carr. She's Confederate Secretary of the European Trade Union Confederation, where she's been covering macroeconomic EU semester and the European pillar of social rights, posting of workers, migration, EU structural funds, the UN Agenda 2030 implementation, and cooperation and development policies. And she has worked before in a number of NGOs in the academia sector and in the Confederation of Estonian Trade Unions. Thank you. And last but not least, we have Pierre Latoureau, who is a member of the European Parliament for France. He holds a diploma on agronomy and political science, and from 2010 to 2015, he was a regional councillor to the Île-de-France region. He co-founded the movement, the Collective Roosevelt, in 2013, and in 2017, he became the vice president of the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, that you might know because they got a Nobel Prize. Together with Jean Jouzel, he launched an initiative to get an European climate, climate pact to fight climate change in Europe, Africa, and around the region of the Mediterranean. We will discuss about that later. So I'm going to start with Mr. Kurz. You know that I was mentioning before that one of our speakers we're going to be really happy to hear that it's important to engage with our citizens. I am sure that Mr. Kurz agree, because he actually came with a model to work for sustainable development by involving citizens in the decision-making process. And I want him to explain to us what do you think should be the role of local authorities in the new Green Deal, and in view of your experience in involving involving citizens in this process?
Ja, herzlichen Dank für die.
Thank you very much for the invitation and for the opportunity to speak to you about our experience. And hopefully that will be helpful for the general debate and for other towns and cities. Perhaps I could make a preliminary comment on our situation, because I think it's important to know what the starting conditions are. Well, Mannheim is a city that is not post-industrial, but it has a very high manufacturing basis, 30% in the one the highest in Germany. And I think it's very important to bear in mind that the requirements for sustainability strategies do differ greatly from one municipality to another. It depends if you have a university town or a town or city that is very industrial. And in that regard, the requirements do differ in terms of sustainability strategies. The second preliminary comment that I'd like to make is as follows. with reference to what we've just heard about division, we've heard about regional division and post-industrial and industrial, that divide. I think both dimensions are quite right, but I thought it was worth mentioning the fact that the discourse in recent years has concentrated on towns and cities versus rural areas, and that's putting it too simply. The major social and spatial divisions actually occur within towns and cities. If we look at the indicators, such as life expectancy, and we see that life expectancies in Mannheim and rural areas, for instance, in southern Germany, where Mannheim is located, are less serious than life expectancy differences within the city itself. So I think the topic of unequal living conditions is something we need to focus on. We shouldn't just focus on towns versus countryside. Also, there's the risk of division, and by just focusing on division, we're not focusing on sustainability. And I think there are some that feel that they are getting left behind when we're talking about sustainability. We've got a 2-year process that we've set up in Mannheim with a local strategy. Mannheim 2030 is the name of this strategy. And we've tried to look at the implementation of the sustainability goals at municipal level. Now, I'm sure, perhaps today we'll be able to stress more the issue of how we can change the language that we're using so that sustainability goals are actually achieved. We have a film that we've put together on the sustainability objectives, the sustainability goals, and we've tried to implement them at the local level. We've also had a consultation for Mannheim 2030 to make sure that everything can be understood properly. There are the 17 global goals. There are 7 local goals that we've come up with for our strategy. And now, in the coming weeks, in a fortnight's time or so, we're going to be having a chain of events where we will look at the question of how we can achieve these goals and what we can each do to contribute towards achieving them. What do we need to do, and how ready are people to contribute? 2,500 people have taken part in this process. One positive experience of this was that we held an event, and we said we had an event. Instead of having a major event, we just wrote to people, and that got a good response. So it's a little bit different to a classic traditional meeting. So we've addressed citizens who normally don't take part, and that proved very, very useful indeed. Involving everyone is key for a sustainability strategy. You really need to do that. As the local authority, we cannot be sustainable just on our own. looking at the climate as a topic and the carbon footprint. As the local authority, 3 to 5% of the CO2 emissions come from the local government. We do have an influence on a number of sectors, but we're not going to be able to change things just on our own, 100% at least. We need to involve the business sector and alter consumer behavior as well. Without involving lots of people and making it a community project, this sustainability, then I would say that it's doomed to failure from the start. So everything has to be done as a project of community interest. The transformations that we're talking about here, transformations towards being sustainable, need to be all-encompassing. And everyone needs to take them on board. With the Green New Deal, I think it's understandable in a sector like energy production. That's relatively easy to understand because the product is the same at the end of it. But energy demand, for instance, means that we might have to change the way we produce energy in a different way, but it's easy to understand. The product is the same at the end of the day. It's just the production means that that differs. Mobility is a slightly more complicated topic, though, even though the product may be the same. We've heard a little bit about nutrition, about food, everything that we eat, that we consume. Then we're into a different dimension completely in terms of the transformation, the change, because we have to ask ourselves whether the products themselves are sustainable and whether our demand is sustainable. How we organize these changes and how we push them forward and how we involve society, these questions are still all open. We can't just say that something is right and there won't be an economic future for our business sector, for instance. The question is, what will the practical ramifications be? At the Committee of the Regions yesterday, we heard that 200 million new jobs could come from a new sustainable Europe. 200 million jobs, replacing perhaps 150 million jobs. So what happens to the people who then have to change jobs? If we're saying that we're creating new value, then we have to prove it in reality, which might be difficult. What does this all mean in reality? What do these changes mean? We need to create awareness of the dimension of the job at hand, and we should face the future with an optimistic strategy rather than get depressed about it. And that's the job for us. I think without a localized debate and a localized approach involving the different stakeholders and society at large, then we will not be successful in this issue. Perhaps I could just invite you to an event, the 9th European Conference on Sustainable Towns and Cities, which will take place in Mannheim in September 2020. We've heard from Agenda 2020 about the Aalborg conference, and I think people remember that conference well. At the 9th conference, we'll be looking at innovation towards an ecological transformation, and how that can be achieved without negative social consequences, how it will be organized, what the different funding opportunities are, and what towns and cities can do. And that's what we'll be looking at the conference.
Thank you very much. I found really interesting the concept of turning the implementation of SDGs into a community project. I think it's very interesting and it's very important to do that, because sometimes we have the impression that citizens don't really understand what the politicians are doing. So the very fact that they are the ones who are going to decide how to adapt the SDGs to the actual life, to the actual problems, I think that's a very interesting approach. And the fact that we need to localize the solutions to make sure that we are successful, it's indeed something that we should definitely discuss. Now I want to move to another question that we have heard today several times, and is the fact that a green transition also have an important impact on people and on workers' lives. So we need a Green Deal, but we need a Green Deal that is fair as well. So I want to ask you, Ms. Carr, how should the Green New Deal be to make sure that we accompany the transition and that no one is left behind?
Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity, giving the European trade union movement the opportunity to present our views on the possible new Green Deal. Perhaps just also for the background, a European Trade Union Confederation is a European umbrella organization representing around 45 million workers in Europe from 38 countries. From our members are 90 national trade union centers, plus 10 European industry federations. So this is who we are. Obviously, the name trade unions presupposes also what we do. But one thing that we definitely do, and is not very obvious to many people, is that we actually also work very closely with climate issues, environmental issues, and how all this relates to the changes in the labor market and the issues of restructuring, what it means for jobs, and also how we work. And this in turn, what kind of social impact it has, what kind of impact it has families, and how we make sure indeed that nobody is left behind when we are busy converting our economies and our societies into green future. This is in a nutshell, but in more detail, we have worked in our own trade union policy, the green policy, how we see it. And for us, in order to achieve this transition, we need the measures, whichever they are, they need to be socially acceptable. Otherwise, we can see all sorts of backlashes. We can see the rise of populism. We can see climate denials, which in turn would lead to the refusal of the population to actually adopt and agree to the mitigation policies. So we see our role in this regard as to advocate for a just transition, which always takes into account the impact on workers, on people. For that, we advocate for solidarity mechanism among EU countries to support the most vulnerable and affected sectors, but also regions. This is also very important because the impact of the policies that we take in order to mitigate the climate change and the measures that we take to mitigate the potential negative effects, these affect different regions very differently. We know that in Europe we have still 41 regions where coal is produced, for example. And very clearly the impact on these regions is going to be much heavier than in some of the other regions. So for us, we definitely demand for proper social protection systems and proper training programs to make sure that the workers who have to go through transitions, precisely you highlighted that there are lots of jobs that are going to disappear and new jobs being created. So there need to be accompanying measures that make sure that these workers who lose their jobs and the new ones that are created, that are actually fit and ready to take up these new jobs. The tools for us is social dialogue, and when it comes to company or sectoral restructuring, is definitely the collective bargaining. That's our tools, that's our job. And also, it is very important to develop local economies and try to assist and help the diversification of activities in different regions. So our objectives, we have worked on them, we know where we want to go, but all these need also concrete measures, how we can actually bring them about. So we also advocate and ask for several measures that need to be taken, and especially at the European level. Because I work at the European level, so I'm as far from a locality or local level as one can be. So I'm here in Brussels and dealing with European policies foremost. So one of the things that we definitely fight for is the subsidies to fossil fuels. And that should provoke also the necessary change and transition from fossil fuels to renewable fuels. The creation of Just Transition Fund, which is also one of the priorities for the incoming Commission President, it is very important to make sure that when this fund is set up, that this actually has money in it to deal with the critical issues that we will be all facing. Because it is no use pretending that we can just have a little nice fund. It would be like a Band-Aid on a huge big cash. And it would not do its job if it's not properly financed and if there is not enough funds behind it. We need to invest in decarbonization of transport. We need to reform what has been mentioned today already is the forestry and agricultural policies. We need to make sure that the trade agreements that the EU is entering into, that they include environmental and ecological conditions and also workers' protection, and that they are really enforceable, these provisions in trade agreements. And we also have to engage seriously in ambitious and proactive environmental diplomacy. Because without that, we are not going to get anywhere. We will not have acceptance of some really harsh transitions that some workers, some regions, some cities have to go through. Money is a big question. We know that the discussions on the next multi-annual financial frameworks are ongoing, and we do hope that they would be actually concluded fairly swiftly, because otherwise we will be facing, or whole Europe will be facing a problem. We will have yet again a period when we can spend no money. And we can not support policies, the positive good policies that would make life better for everybody. But there are other ways of also looking at how we can get more money to finance the public policies necessary. And one thing is that we really have to fight tax avoidance and tax fraud. We also have to look at really seriously, and these proposals are on the table also, the digital taxation. How do we actually tax the huge big multinationals that operate in Europe using our infrastructures that our public authorities, our public money has gone into? And they're using it all. So how are we going to tax it? How are we going to make them to contribute to the upkeep and renewal of these systems? And of course, I mentioned also already that training is a very important part. So reskilling, upskilling, retraining, but also looking at critically how we educate our youngsters in the first place. And perhaps just to mention some of the policies that when we go through and see what new Commission President Mrs. von der Leyen has put forward, there are lots of good ideas. We can find European climate law to enshrine the 2050 climate neutrality objectives, the extension to EU emission trading systems, a plan for the future-ready economy and new industrial strategy, even more ambitious, a world leadership in circular economy and clean technologies. Just Transition Fund, I already mentioned. She talks about the European Climate Pact. She also talks about the Sustainable Europe Investment Plan, or EU Invest, which is supposed to be the continuation or the next step of what we know Juncker's plan. This is supposed to project or support projects for almost 1 trillion euros in the next decade. And there is also ideas of turning part of the European Investment Bank into a climate bank. But there is a slight problem, because what we saw with the Juncker plan, the idea was good, and yes, indeed it brought in private capital and private investment, but it was implemented through the European Investment Bank, which is a market-driven bank. The operations are market-driven, so there was very little social investment that we could see. The discussions that we have had so far on InvestEU, there are promises that there would be kind of certain funds or certain amount of money earmarked for social investment. But if it's still in the hands of the EIB, how are we going to do it? Still, their way of functioning, their way of thinking is a market way of thinking. And market doesn't necessarily want to take more high-risk, low-return investments in public good. So there is a really place where we have to think very carefully. Then there is a biodiversity strategy for 2030. There is a farm to fork strategy for sustainable food, and a new circular economy action plan. So there are lots of things there. But if you think about it, and coming back to the MFF, coming back to the Cohesion Fund, to the European Social Fund, all these initiatives require lots of money. And there is not enough. There is very clearly not enough, because when we talk about the DG employment, for example, they say that already from the new budget, 80% of the funds that are predicted to appear in the new budget are already kind of under various headings that exist already. So we have only 20% for the new initiatives, so it just doesn't add up. And when I asked the incoming executive commission or commission executive vice president Timmermans, because he's going to be responsible for implementing the Green Deal and the environmental issues, and when he talked about the transition fund, I asked, is there actually a new money coming into it? And he was very vague in his reply. And I mean, I can't blame him. He has been given a dossier with a grand idea, but not means to carry it out. Because it is more of sort of taking money out of your right pocket and putting it into your left pocket. But this is not going to help us. This is not going to get us where we need to go and where we want to go. So we have lots of work to do, all of us together. We can't work in our sort of silos or our pocket in different little areas where we feel comfortable. We need to really build lots of alliances, work together in order to get the best possible Green Deal that we can have for Europe.
Thank you very much. I think you pointed out very interesting points, and one of them that I want to cut just right now, as you were mentioning now, when we are talking about all this new legislation, all these new initiatives, we're not talking about new money, and this is something that has created problems even within the European Council when it comes to agreeing on a strategy to become neutral by 2050. Some member states that are way behind the others were complaining, okay, you're telling us you're going to give us more money, but you're not actually increasing the budget for the next MFF. So how can I be sure that actually I'm going to have that investment? But then you pointed out on what we were discussing before, this has to be mainstream. This has to be trying to make Europe greener, has to be a mainstream policy that it's applied to industry strategy, to labor law. It has to be to education, because we need to reskill workers. So indeed, we have a lot of work to do, both at policy level, but also in terms of investment. And talking about money, I think I'm going to turn to Pierre Lerotourou, because you've been working quite a lot on this particular issue. So I want to understand how your proposal for a climate finance pact could work, and if considering the current situation, the proposal for the MFF, do we have enough money for a green transition?
Merci beaucoup. C'est une question de volonté politique.
Thank you very much. Well, we need political will, but money is important too. Now, thank you very much. We've had an interesting debate. We've heard Paul Magnette, Peter Kors. Listening to them, you can see that climate change issues locally. That's where the solutions are coming. That's where you can have new hope. We heard that there are 2,500 people in Mannheim thinking about all of this, but local representatives are saying that we're up against a money wall. We want to go 10, 20 times faster. We want to do all of this, and we've been told there's no money. Same in Germany, France, Italy, Poland, and so on. So I think that what Lena said is very true, that everything's happening locally, but we need social rules, we need funding, otherwise we'll be robbing Peter to pay Paul. 7 years since 2012, we've been asking for a climate bank, and a month ago I went to the finance minister in Paris. They said, yes, we'll have it, but just a logo for the time being. There'll be 0.0 billion of own funds. So I heard from Mr. Dombrovski that them saying that BMW are doubling their amount for climate. So the Commission's saying that there's 300 billion missing, and Mr. Dombrovski is saying that the BMI is going to add 15 billion more, but we're going to be cutting for other types of investments. So it's absolutely ridiculous. We were saying that we need innovation. Are we trying to show you that we can fight for a much more ambitious multi-annual budget? Now, if you can see the slide, there's one problem that we're going to be up against. In France, we sometimes say we're one of the 5 countries that saw the crisis coming in 2008. That's going to happen again. This curve is the total debt curve in the US. Now, it was up 2.58 billion in 2018. That's never happened before. In the US and China, it's going up very steeply. It's under Donald Trump. To get 1 point of growth in the US, you need 7 points of debt. The FMI is saying, the IMF saying that there's going to be a new crisis around the corner. And as you can say, a new crisis, according to the IMF, could mean 10 times more ravages than 10 years ago. So we need momentum. We need to do things at a European level, because there's lots moving that you can be optimistic in. And Mannheim and everywhere else, Wallonia too. But if we see populism and unemployment with the crisis, then we're going to have a political crisis. Not sure how Europe's going to get over this. We need to make sure that we tackle the climate crisis. We need a solution allowing at the same time for the economic model to be rebalanced, and at the same time as taking action on job creation and climate. So it's urgent. The good news is that the climate pact that I'm putting to you, we've been working on it for the last 7 years. We've drawn it out thanks to high-level legal experts. We've got 2 funding tools, a real climate bank that each year would guarantee 300 billion euros in loans. I'll tell you how it's attainable, and a climate budget. Now in France we have villages, 10,000 villages supporting this. We've got the right and left, everyone on board. European trade unions saying, let's get serious, let's stop just talking, let's act. Emmanuel Carmona, Mayor of Madrid, Bordeaux, all the mayors have been on board. They've got very different approaches, but the Freemasons as well, and the Pope all together. But there's money. We need to stop thinking there's no money. As you know, the European Central Bank in 2008 stumped up $1 billion to save the banks, 100 billion, 1,000 billion. But then we saw quantitative easing 2.6 billion euros, and Mario Draghi has now said that the ECB is going to create 240 million in one year. If the speaker could slow down a bit, that would help, please. 7 billion euros each year. In France, the minister stepped down. They said 7 billion euros is not enough. Mario Draghi has just said that they're going to have 240 billion in 1 year. The problem is that if you don't do anything, experience that we've seen from quantitative easing for the last 4 years has shown that the exact figures are 89% of the money from the ECB is gone off to speculation, and only 11% is from the real economy. So the question we were asking yesterday to Dombrovskis from the S&D group was, there is 240 billion on the table from the ECB. Is that money going to go off to speculation, or is that money going to create jobs across the board for funding for public transport and so on? And you shouldn't say it's legally difficult. We heard yesterday from the Future Commissioner that in 2008 you needed 1 week to deal with all the legal issues. Now, I went to the finance minister in Paris. They set up for 4 nights, but in 1 week they had the legal tools so that the ECB's money could go to the banks that needed it. So the legal problems, you can say the ECB is not there for that. It's just a wrong argument. It's not true. If you want the money, it's available. So specifically, we're looking at having a climate bank. Philip Mestab there. He was the boss of the European Investment Bank. He knows what he's talking about, and he's been saying, let's change the EIB and put a few billion of own resources for a European pact. We need stability locally. We're going to be sure that we have financing to train people, create jobs. We need to make sure that we've got enough. We need work for 20 years. We need funding for that as well. Each country will have 2% of its GDP funding. Nicholas Stern, the English economist, has said it's not too late to act. We can still win the climate and jobs battle, but in order to be up to the task, to make up for lost time, each country needs to know that over 20, 30 years, they are going to have 2% of their GDP. Belgium will have 9 billion, Germany 60 billion, France 40 billion. So we'll be able to have public transport, invest in buildings and agriculture too. It's totally possible. The EIB people have said that when the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, it took 6 months to set up for Helmut Kohl and Mitterrand to move to that. It wasn't ecological transition, it was the transition in Poland and Czechoslovakia, but in 6 months from nothing they set up the ERBD. Now we're not going from nothing. There's already networks in place on the ground, so we just need a bit of political will and to put money in there. Second tool is we need funding. This is what Philip Mestab, the EIB boss, has said. 0% loans are important for long-term gains, such as public transport and so on, but you're never going to get profitability if you don't have subsidies. If you want to insulate all the houses and schools, then you can't ask each family to stump up the whole amount of the bill or ask villages and towns to pay for all of this. So we need to have European subsidies allowing people to get help for their bills for insulation, and farmers, for example, so that they don't dump their animal waste. They invest in biogas, 500,000 to invest in that, for example, for each farmer they would get. So that means they pay half of the bill. Lots of farmers in Poland, France, saying fine. That helps us to get additional money for farmers. The Polish agricultural minister was saying this last week. So at the same time, as a climate bank, we want a climate budget for a real Marshall Plan for Africa. Angela Merkel was saying 2 years ago that Africa was going to explode if there was an investment plan. Now, my friend has been saying that AIDS has killed billions of deaths, and the same will go for climate change in Africa if we don't change things. We need a Marshall Plan for Africa to develop it economically, to get away from oil and gas. Africa has the right physical resources, such as intellectual resources, sun and so on, but we need investment. And Europe has the obligation, the right to do that. We need proper research. Europe spent billions on Airbus, Ariane, the satellite. There's successes, but we also need to put billions into improving renewables for storage. Cars that are green. Obviously, you need to cycle and walk more as well, but everyone needs personal mobility from time to time. There are regions that don't have proper public transport, so Europe needs to be able to have lighter, less consuming cars. So there's a lot needed for research and subsidies as well for everybody. So we're looking at 100 billion climate budget per year. Where do you find that money from without having yellow vests out on the streets holding everything up? Because we need tax. 30% of Europeans go into the red every month. So if we ask them to stump up more, then they're not going to be very happy about that. So how do you get 100 billion without having a political stalemate, economic as well? If you take Jacques Delors' ideas, when he was young, he said that we need to stop European fiscal dumping. And it's quite impressive, this graph here. This is to do with tax, income tax. If all countries bring it down because their neighbours are doing the same, and dividends are going up. The Figaro is not left wing, obviously, but they said that dividends have gone up by 23.5% in France. It's quite a shock because dividends are going up. They haven't ever gone up that much across the country. Income tax is going down because neighbouring countries are doing the same. The US, it's obviously not the Soviet Union, but income tax were 38% under Roosevelt. When he came, it was the same issue. Florida was putting down their taxes, Texas, Kansas, and companies were doing tax tourism, and it's very bad for receipts. And in 4 months only, Roosevelt had a federal decree saying that if you're in Texas or wherever else, it's 38%. So it's quite surprising to hear that in the US, a liberal economy, the average is 38%, and we have gone down to 19% in Europe. So to have a budget, to have subsidies, to accelerate growth, we're taking out Jacques Delors and Mario Monti's ideas, saying that if we want, after Brexit, to be more ambitious, then we need to find our own resources, because otherwise you're going to have 27 Thatchers saying, don't want any more Europe, but if you ask for more money for them, they'll say, no, not with my money. So you need your own resources. You can have a carbon tax on the border, but that will be difficult. We need advance on that. You can have a plastic tax, it's a great idea, but that's not going to be a lot. And that may well drop out, but since 1933, it's worked in the US, corporation tax. So we're looking at a federal income tax on companies. It wouldn't touch citizens or smaller companies, because they're the ones that bear the fruits. So it could be 3%, 4%, 5%. That's not the end of the world. It depends on the carbon balance sheet and how that changes. And if we've got this European company income tax, and over a few years, then you could have 100 billion budget, and that would be a catalyst. You could have 0% loans, and we need to be properly competitive. You could have a 0% rate, including for projects that aren't particularly profitable, but you need to move ahead from just profitability. The Climate Bank would have 2% of GDP for loans, 3 billion per year, so that's an additional budget. Now, looking at Mali, there was for the AIDS crisis, there was a three-pronged attack, and the same thing we have to have here. At local level, you need to have dynamism, and I am an MEP. I'm very new still, but we've done our utmost to be more ambitious in our group. It would be good to have everyone on board from everywhere in Europe. This is the time to change. But when Roosevelt came into power in 5 years, he put up the federal budget by 3 times. Kennedy went to the moon, and NASA budget went up by 15-fold. Now, accountants thought it was awful. They thought Kennedy was mad. You want to go to the moon, you're mad. But in 7 years, they got to the moon. They created 400,000 new jobs. No one regretted it. And 400,000 new jobs. Just one point to finish on. Social dimension here. The other day I was in Grenoble, where the MPs showed me that there was social housing that had been insulated. There was a man that had been there for 20 years, and he said that it's great. My building has been insulated over the last couple of years. 800 euros is how much I save on my heating bill. It's warmer in the winter, colder in the summer. And he was saying it's much more comfortable year round. We've created jobs in the building. Personally speaking, I save 800 euros that I can use for my family each year. So anyone that says we can't do this, if Trump says you can't deal with the climate and feed people, that's wrong. We need to show that we can do the opposite, particularly if we have the new financial crisis. We need to have the right resources for people to deal with the climate on the ground. That's the best way to deal with the social dimension. Better purchasing power for everyone. I think we've seen the model in the US working, Japan as well. But if we do what Trump says, then we'll be dead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Because I promised that I was going to leave some time for questions. I'm going to ask you to reply to something very quickly, all of you. First of all, I think you have again pointed out to many different issues that are very interesting. And one of them is that when there is a will, there is a way. And we've seen that in many different cases in Europe, whereas now we are only seeing a lot of push for a green policy because we've seen also the pressure of citizens going on the street or people voting for parties that had a green program, and we are seeing that more and more in Europe. But again, when some of the measures that you mentioned, and in particular I was thinking about these tax on corporate benefits, we've seen that there is a proposal for that, but that's blocked at the European Council, at the Council, because at the end there you need unanimity. So how do we convince the countries, the governments, that we need that? And how do we overcome that blockage that we are seeing? And I am talking about the role that you have as a representative of the European Parliament. I'm talking about the role that you have as a member of the trade unions. And I'm talking about the role that you have as a local representative, as a local politician. How do we overcome this blockage to make sure that we have an actual workable, an effective green policy, mainstream green policy, that we make sure that we protect our planet and that we are here in a perfect place in 50 years. So please, brief question, brief answer, but really strong message to try to close the debate.
Ich glaube, wenn wir jetzt nicht an
Well, if we're not thinking about individual countries and the climate crisis, then I think it's a more complicated situation. I'd describe it that it doesn't seem to be that we believe in our own message. It's one thing to acknowledge sustainability and to acknowledge the sustainability goals, but to actually say that we can succeed in transforming the economy is another. In practice, with the German climate package, for instance, if you look at that, if we're saying we're putting too much burden on the business sector or on the general public, then that's going to be a problem. We need to be successful. Perhaps I can mention one stakeholder that hasn't been mentioned enough, and that's the business sector. Of course, this is a job for national and European politicians. They need to talk to businesses and talk to them about their sustainability strategies. The one problem is that the business sector is not involved enough. And secondly, think of all the employees that they have. If we set a new framework in favor of sustainability and they pass on the message that that people's jobs are in danger, then I think that basically the business sector has not been addressed or involved enough. There's the question of what products we want in the future in terms of sustainability. But of course, they have to make their businesses more sustainable. We need this level. And the transformation process needs to be looked at as well. Within a company, if it's completely different to organize some new jobs in a company rather than saying we're going to lay off people and have a policy where we are going to have to retrain people and create new jobs further down the line for those that have lost their jobs. So it's completely different. So unless we can convince industry to get involved and to formulate strategies for their own businesses, then I don't think this will be able to work, politically speaking. And I think thus far, we haven't done enough in this regard. That's an urgent job for us to do, and that needs to be done at the local level with the SMEs. We can do that at the local level, but we can't do it with big business. That's something that Europe can do and national governments can do.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, when we talk about jobs being lost, we often don't talk about the fact that maybe if the industry will be more involved and would decide to make those changes, we would just simply go into a transition and we wouldn't need to talk about this as well. I'm not sure if the other speakers agree whether or not the businesses are sufficiently involved in this discussion. I actually believe that often there is not so much will, and whereas in some other businesses, they have realized how important it is to make that investment, and in the long term, they have realized that that has a positive economic impact in their own business. So, I think that there sometimes it's not so much about the involvement, but also about the need to be aware of the benefits of investing in these particular issues. But let's talk about from the social perspective again.
Just perhaps to add, when it comes to businesses, actually there are lots of business initiatives, and there are lots of actually big important businesses where they have come together and they are really brainstorming and putting together strategies how to deal with the transitions that are happening now, climate, digitalization, and how they can actually make a positive contribution. When it comes to concrete measures, it is very clear that when there is a need for restructuring, there is also a need for a mix of private and public measures, because the companies themselves have a responsibility to to train their workers, to make sure that they actually have the right skills that they need for developing their business and keep it profitable and keep it going. That's their own responsibility, and so they need to invest in it. But in situations when indeed there are conditions or circumstances that they cannot really control, there is a need for assistance and support to make sure that businesses that actually have a future possibility and future prospects in this new green economy, that they are not dead before they can actually really work and produce. So the mix, the question is, what is the right mix? How do we get it? I mean, yet again, I come back to the beginning. For trade unions, we negotiate. That's our job, we negotiate. We negotiate for our members, for the workers who would be affected. And we try to negotiate the best possible deal for them and for their families. That's one level. The other level is the social dialogue, which is with the government, which is with the European Commission, which is with Business Europe, SMEs United, and the CEEP here at the European level. Unfortunately, what we see here at European level is that Business Europe seems to be paralyzed, because their mix of members, there are some who are progressive, who would like to move forward to be green, and there are others who refuse to basically block everything and refuse to talk about it. And so there is Business Europe as the European level umbrella organization, one of the most important business voices here in Brussels at European level, is paralyzed. They cannot speak with one voice because they cannot formulate this one voice. And this is a very serious problem. But indeed, I reiterate, we cannot have new Green Deal, we cannot have sustainable, ecologically, environmentally sustainable future if we do not have a parallel, socially sustainable future as well.
A message that I've been hearing from the European Confederation of Trade Unions lately is that the social contract is broken and we need to rebuild it in Europe. And the fact that you're mentioning right now that there is a sense of panic in the business sector and they are not sure how to rebuild that social contract and therefore you cannot pursue the dialogue, it seems like a really serious problem that indeed we need to address. And I think, again, this could go back to the role of the governments, the role of the public sector in trying to build in that dialogue. And I know that the Juncker Commission has been doing a good job in that Madame Thyssen has been really involved in this process. So let's see how that works in the new Commission, given that the social aspect is being stripped away of the title of the new commissioner. But now let's go back to how do we convince the member states to put the money on the table so we can actually finance this Green New Deal?
Pardon, excuse me. Peter disait qu'il y a bien un nouveau.
Well, there is this new policy framework. We need to have rules and funding for this new ambition. As a social democrat, I think it can be done. Because it's urgent, we need to take the time to dialogue on this. We need to explain how this is an opportunity. Lots of people are afraid of the future, afraid of change, and I think by dialogue, what you're doing in Mannheim and what you're doing at the European level, a former president of the European trade unions gave me a video which showed someone who used to work in coal, but now someone who works closer to home, but it's better for their health. So we can explain to people it's better for their health and say, well, it took 2 or 3 years to change. It was difficult, but jobs have been created. So I can say to someone, someone in Grenoble told me that they were 800 euros better off from this kind of change. So I think that what we need to do, and if there's going to be a recession. The IMF is telling us there's going to be a recession. We need to act on the ground with EU funding for climate. And that's the best way to create quality jobs, quality well-paid jobs, and to make sure that jobs are not relocated. 5 million jobs. And I think this will be people who will be paying into the social security system for their pensions. If you've got 5 million jobs, I think we need to explain all of this to people. On Saturday, I met the Polish climate minister, president of COP24. And I think that we need to have this overall vision. If we're going to phase out coal in Poland, Spain, or Germany, where there are coal mines, there are going to be 90,000 people going to lose their jobs. But if there is funding to create jobs in construction, in public transport, and if you're training people, because you know that there are jobs 10 kilometers away, when they lose their jobs, it's easier to convince someone saying, well, you're going to lose your job in coal, but there are quality jobs that have been created locally. On the funding question, I think it's better to have a global transformation. What can we do politically? Well, we're playing our role. Our president has just arrived, and our president has sent 2 letters to Ms. von der Leyen asking about priorities to make sure that we can have guarantees. The climate bank, for instance. We would like adults leading Europe to be able to act. The important thing is to say that progress can be made even if we don't have everybody is not on board. I was with our President Sanchez in Madrid, and it's better to have everyone on board, the 27 or the 28 countries, but if not, there can be improved cooperation, even if it's only 12 or 14 countries. That's what Alvarez told me. For Schengen, that started with 5 countries, then 8, and now 26. If we'd waited for the 26, we wouldn't have had Schengen. If we wait for a climate and jobs pact, it'll take a long time. The Polish minister said that they did support this, so that's great if we can get the 27 or 28 on board. But some of us could start already. I think we don't have to have unanimity on this. You've got an inertia and lobbies blocking this, and these lobbies still want to have oil and profits from oil, and they still want to have their big cars, etc., etc. The EESC, thanks to trade unions, supports the idea of an EU climate pact. We at the Committee of the Regions need to do our job as well. We have to work with Greenpeace and NGOs. And the Commission, we need help over the next 6 months, not the next 15 years, but we need to say, let's get started on this. We need to take a great leap on this with coal and steel. We need this money from the ECB. Well, this money's coming in from the ECB soon, and we need to make sure that this money is channeled into the climate and jobs.
I want to thank you for all the positive messages that we're hearing today, because I think it's important to point out to the solutions, not only to the problems. And I want to close this panel. I owe you some questions, I know, but you will have the chance to talk to the speakers afterwards during the networking drinks. So I'm sorry, but I have to close the panel and move to our president that you mentioned right now. So I want to invite Irache Pérez García, the president of the S&D Group in the European Parliament, to deliver her closing speech. She has been an MEP since 2004, where she has worked at the Committees for Women's Rights and Gender Equality, Regional Development, Agriculture and Rural Development, and she has been a member also of the Spanish Parliament and does have a local experience. She was elected at the Valladolid Provincial Assembly. So please, Irache, bienvenida.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues, dear friends. I'm very happy to be here with you and to have this opportunity. I will speak in Spanish, maybe you will need a translation. Y insistir, reiterar.
Well, once again, I'd like to extend my gratitude for the invitation to close off this working session. Physically, we're here together, but we don't often meet, so we need to get together more often. We need to talk more and work and cooperate more closely than we already are. So, firstly, I would like to congratulate Christoph for his nomination as PES Committee of the Regents President, and I really do want us to work together, both institutions, very closely. I'd like to say hello to politicians, local and regional, and it's important that you're here with us, not only to network together, to get to know each other better, but also so we can hear your concerns and objectives. I began my political career as a councillor, so I know that your job is essential for people and to strengthen our political movement. Social democracy, progressiveness starts at local level, and politics that are close to people, where people are sensitive and empathic. So I'd like to recognise the commitments taken by the men and women of our political family, so that we can meet the ultimate objective, which is to improve life for people, and that's essential at local and regional level. All of us want to build a more progressive Europe based on solidarity, equality, and that's respectful of the environment. And we can't do that on our own. Each of us needs to shoulder their part of the responsibility to transform society, make it fairer, and increase solidarity between future generations. This February, we adopted the joint declaration so that no one is left behind anywhere in the EU. And in this period that we're beginning, we've got 5 years ahead of us to meet that objective. As president of the S&D Group in the European Parliament, I would like to take the clear commitment and put that to the European Commission. We have achieved important commitments from the President-elect, Ms. von der Leyen. Thanks to the work we've done at the S&D family, Ms. von der Leyen has committed at the European Parliament to set the priorities that were very important for our political family. We've got her to accept an investment plan for green transition, and to get Franz Timmermans to be the top man for that job. Part of the European Investment Bank will be changed into a climate bank, and there will be border carbon taxes. Pierre is an active member of the S&D on this, our colleague that's here today. That's a clear example of the huge commitment that we've taken at the moment to make progress on that score. We're also aware that without you, we wouldn't be able to make that transition. Cities and regions of the EU, all of us are responsible for applying 70% of legislation from the EU, and that's what's closest to the citizens. That's what we keep on saying is important. Local and regional administration being close to the people, because they're the people that know what citizens need on the ground. Sometimes people don't know who their MEP is, but everyone knows who their mayor is. That's the closest politics gets, and we need to be clearer and more, and that's where our work really hits. So that's why we need more cooperation between different levels of administration, and the better we can strike partnerships and work alongside civil society, the more we'll be able to move towards fair transition, because that is what underpins the thinking of our political group, a fair transition, because no one, or hardly anyone, denies the need for commitments to be taken in fighting climate change. But we in the S&D group need to put our heads above the parapet and make sure that it's a fair transition that leaves no one behind, that the necessary changes for our economies and for jobs, that it takes into account who will be the most affected and who needs the most support from the public sector there, because we're not only interested in the environment, that is obviously important, but we're not only looking at decarbonising the economy. Obviously, we need to take urgent action to save the planet, but not at the cost of the middle classes or the most vulnerable people. We need to strengthen our social protection model and we need to make sure that we don't drop our social standards. We should take this transition as an opportunity to reduce inequalities, to give fair opportunities for everyone, so that we reverse depopulation of rural areas, create new quality jobs for young people, and make sure that there are good pensions for older people. The platform that you've set up at the Committee of the Regions to network progressive local and regional decision-making makers is a great initiative in order to move that forward, so people can learn from each other and improve practice, and obviously to listen, which is essential for us. The progressive local levels is essential in getting in touch with civil society and changing politics, increasing participation and trying to build Europe from the local level to the supranational as opposed to vice versa. As we've seen, there's no magic solution for all cities or regions. What we need to do is look at things on a case-by-case basis and adapt policy, and to do that you need to listen. And I will call upon members of my political groups who to take part in those activities. We will carry on working to make sure that European policies contribute to sustainable development for our cities and regions. We have the MFF revision coming up, and we've been talking about that in the European Parliament plenary, and we will look at that with the Commission on the 17th and 18th of October. We've looked at the need to deal with a multi-annual financial framework so that we can make sure that regions and cities have time to adapt to change, the change that needs to happen. We can have opportunities if the two sides can meet and we can talk about how from the local and regional level up we can meet the challenges and changes of the transformation that Europe needs at the moment, and how we're going to do that with a big budget, a solid budget, without allowing for cuts, so that also we have new ways of increasing the community budget by means of own resources, the EU's own resources, which is another debate on the table. We need to be able to move forward with that one. And when the new Commission starts working, we'll be on them with that, and we'll be striking permanent coordination with all commissioners. Obviously, we have a great ally who will be Lisa Ferreira, our colleague, who I'm quite sure that you will get to work with her, to cooperate with her, so that we can have good regional, local and European policy, because together, I'm certain of this, we are stronger, which is why with your suggestions, your cooperation, your collaboration, we're prepared to lead the change, the transformation Europe needs in the forthcoming years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Irache. You have pointed to many of the issues that we have discussed today, and I think it's very important to recall, and it's a really strong message, the need to join forces to make sure that the green transition is a fair transition. And you have ahead the negotiation of the MFF, so I'm sure that the local leaders here are very happy to know that you're committed to make sure that that budget is actually working for people. So thank you very much for your intervention. Gracias. And now we're going to pass to another closing speaker, and with this we will close our debate today, is the newly elected president of the Party of the European Socialist Group in the Committee of the Regions, Christophe Rouillon. who is a mayor of Coulon in France from 2001. He's been a member of the Committee of the Regions since 2005. He's been vice president of the Association of the French Mayors, and he was the vice president of this group until yesterday when he got elected. So congratulations on your election, and please go ahead. Thank you so much.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Adache, for being here. I'm very pleased that we could have you here. A new Spanish president of the Socialist and Democrat group in the European Parliament. I could have come with champagne for everyone, but next time, everyone. I'm pleased to be here on such a high level panel. Mannheim is a great German city for sustainable development and fighting climate change. And it's great to be here with Pierre Latour, who's got some great ideas as an MEP. He can help move things forward in a context that isn't necessarily easy. I'm pleased to be with you at this European level. You're here to give us ideas and to replace us as well. I became a mayor when I was 34 years old, where there was 50% social housing in the city, lots of poverty. But we were the first municipality and the 7th in Europe to sign the Mayor's Pact against global warming. And in 6 years in our country, we've seen butterflies come back and small animals, and we've cut emissions by 30%. That's for greenhouse gas emissions. So you can do something at the local level. And you can do things at the local level. The Committee of the Regions, if you look at it, acting locally but thinking globally, we're not just trying to set up small villages and say France first or Spain first. We are Europeans and we want to have a global vision because the energy transition and questions related to it are a global issue. At the moment, we're looking at a key point. We're in the 101st days of the von der Leyen Commission, that's coming up. And we hope that we can support the work of Frans Timmermans, the Vice President, who's launched this idea for a new Green Deal, which will give some momentum to European policy. I don't think we should mention the Marshall Plan. The Marshall Plan was a few €100 million, but Europe has done more, and that was loans as well under the Marshall Plan. Europe does 1,000 times more than that. The 350 billion or the billions under the Juncker Plan or the Mario Draghi's billions as well, who's been an excellent ECB head, are needed to deal with the issues of the energy transition and social aspects. We have to help the weaker regions and the weaker towns and cities to face the energy transition. Those are the ones that are on the front line. And the energy transition should not contradict social objectives. We need to move from the Horizon 2020 strategy at the European level towards a new strategy that is more ambitious, which means that we have to step away from this intergovernmental approach and the piecemeal solutions at the European level. With the implementation of sustainable development goals, we see that we're dragging our feet slightly. There are lots of European regions that feel that they have been abandoned. The impression is that some regions have been left to deal with this on their own. We need to be progressive regions. We need to act and bridge the gap between the richer and poorest regions. We need to repair the damage caused by industrial development without any limits. We need the European Union now more than ever to help us. We need to use local authorities and regions as a driver, as support, and as a testing ground, such as in Mannheim or the Valencia region or Franco-Jacobs, Trieste region, where there are some really great policies that have been carried out with a lot of input from people. In the Socialist Group of the Committee of the Region, we hope to set up a platform that will allow us to exchange practices and raise the profile of what's being done in these regions, in these social democrat regions. There's nothing worse than despair. We need to give people hope. I've got 4 children, and they want to know if the planet's going to be livable still in 50 years' time. We need people like Greta Thunberg to be whistleblowers, if you like. We cannot reject the idea of progress. We need a European strategy, and to put in place this European strategy, we need to strengthen territorial cohesion policy, which is the main instrument for addressing inequalities between regions. And the 2007 crisis saw these gaps between regions grow. The difference in incomes between the City of London and Extremadura are huge, and you can see that the distribution of wealth between 2007 and 2017, you can see that this is a map of Brexit almost, and poverty, and a lot of work needs to be done. Local government cannot do this on its own. It cannot address this idea of a two-speed Europe. Trade unions, workers, NGOs, and young people need to be involved, particularly young politicians. The Conference on the Future of Europe, which Ms. von der Leyen has suggested, is a good step, but it's not going to be enough. At the Committee of the Regions, we've suggested there is a permanent mechanism for consulting citizens with debates throughout Europe, with some kind of output that can be taken to the summit. And in 2020, we're going to set up this permanent consultation facility. That's going to be our priority. Thirdly, we want a just, fair transition. It shouldn't be the poorest that foot the bill for the energy transition. Looking at to what's happened with the Yellow Vest movement in France, it is the low earners that have been paying the bill. And we've seen inequalities grow. We need more funding. The Sustainable Development Goals need to be incorporated in the EU's governance model. The European semester should be a way of checking that social criteria and environmental criteria are considered. The Green New Deal is necessary. We need to go beyond that, though. If we're talking about a 1,000 billion being on the table here, then that money needs to be used, and local government needs to be empowered to do this. We, in my municipality, insulated houses, and that gave the lowest earners, the poorest, more disposable income. And for example, our municipal swimming pool, we were able to save lots of greenhouse gas emissions. It might seem slightly strange that, but it was a big emitter. We need a more social Europe, not a two-speed Europe, and I hope that you will be the ambassadors and the crafts people behind this change to give this some momentum and to galvanize public opinion over the next few months in the service of a better Europe and a Europe that shows more solidarity. I'll round off by thanking each of the speakers. This was an initial initiative involving our two groups, and I would call on all of you to get involved. Hopefully one day you'll be here instead of us, and you'll be even more ambitious with your proposals than we are, and that we'll be able to answer the concerns of young people and the social imperatives. We will remain committed. We need your support to win this battle for a more progressive Europe and a Europe that is more sustainable at the same time. Thank you very much for your listening, and thank you to everyone.
Thank you very much. With this, we conclude this workshop. I would like to thank all of the speakers and the organization, and particularly the interpreters that have decided to stay a little while longer so that we would be able to finish the workshop. So please, an applause also for them.